Welcome everybody, and as you know, I'm always delighted to have guests on my podcast. And today, taking a slightly different tack for me, because I've started to move into the world of agencies and marketing agencies in that world of some work I've been doing with the BD 100. And I met the lovely Julie, who we have today. Julie has just pivoted into setting up her own consulting business. Join the Dots, consulting back into the world of marketing agencies and helping them fundamentally build the DNA of new business culture, behaviors, etc., into what they do in their world. So I thought it'd be really interesting to get Julie on and just share her insights and knowledge and expertise into what new business looks like in the world of marketing agencies, and see if we can draw some comparisons. And as she says, it needs to be a cultural part of your DNA. I'm paraphrasing from your blog post here. Anyway, enough about me, Julie. Lovely to meet you. Who, what, why, when, where, and as usual, let's see where this takes us.
Great. Alex, lovely to be here. Thanks so much for the invite. And as you said, we just met on a hop-in conference networking event, which first I have to say was a really good eye-opener for me, because new business is all about building relationships. And I've so missed that, like everybody else, about getting to events, meeting face-to-face, having a coffee, having a natter. And actually the BD 100 event on the events platform was quite good, wasn't it, from a point of view of accessing networking areas, so you could sort of bumble off and click on a link and chat to people, and made some really good contacts. So yeah, it was really nice to catch up with you, Alex, and thanks ever so much for the invite. Yeah, a bit about me. I've been in new business for over 15 years now in various guises. Prior to that, I was in sales and marketing for brands like Bacardi, Courage, Rothmans. So I was a fags and drinks girl before the day. Obviously don't smoke now, but I still try to have the odd cocktail, keep that side of the business up. But I moved, having had some time off to have my son, I then moved into new business. I didn't know I was going into new business. I mean, I don't think you start off going, I'm going to be a new business guru.
No.
But somewhere along the line, with my sales and marketing background, I started working for a UX consultancy when UX wasn't even a thing. No one knew really what UX was. Now that was 15 years ago. So it was a great grounding. And then I think the job I went to then was actually working for a new business agency. So I don't know if you're aware of these, but we basically had around 40 agencies on our books who didn't have the budget necessary to employ new person in their company, but wanted to engage with new clients. So I worked with around 40 different clients and did a bit of rolling my sleeves up, getting engaged, getting outbound on the phone, talking to people, doing emails, agreeing campaigns, and then became the client services director for that. So that was a real big learning curve. So I feel I've got a real fundamental grounding in outbound new business, and also the fundamental issues that agencies have about how they do that or how they don't manage to do that. And then I've been working up till just before COVID for a global marketing consultancy, where I was a global new business director, and I was responsible for the marketing and the new business there, Alex. And that was the eye opener for me. That was a bit that was like, well, I always knew it's a struggle, but actually working with being responsible and accountable for the marketing and the new business made me realize, gosh, it's so important that they work together. And that's where I got the name for my consultancy of Join Up Dots, basically putting new business and marketing together, and that's really going to be where things are maximized and where you get those new relationships, and also retain your current clients and build some great talent for any agency. So that's kind of how I found myself at Join Up the Dots. So a bit of background.
Cool. And so you've been on the buy side and the sell side, I guess. You've been on the receiving end of agencies kind of pitching you back in the day, and then also been on the other side of the table in terms of pitching to agencies, which I always believe gives you that well-rounded experience when you can kind of say, look, I've been there and done it. I get both sides of the coin, which then gives you that unique experience. I think it's always interesting when you see, on the management side, managers coming in, or new sales managers, sales directors, whatever, they've never carried a bag, and it's like, well, how can you manage me if you've never picked up the phone, if you've never done this? And then you've also got the experience on the other side. And Rothmans, which was the we digress. Which was the F1 team that Rothmans sponsored? Was it was it Williams? I think you
I
sponsored.
think it was. I'm trying to think. I used to have a branded Cavalier with Rothmans down the side. I mean,
Cavalier.
it was amazing. It was amazing. I was like, well, what was I? 23, and I was just like, I had a safe in the boot, so I used to go to the cash and carry, load up the fags, and I used to go to all the news agents. I had to do 15 calls a day. You know, it's all this back to really good structured sales. That's where anyone says to me, what's been the thing that's been a success in your career, and I think it's been down to that really good FMCG sales training and doing those 15 calls a day, walking into a news agent when he's selling somebody something and you're trying to sell him some Craven A crap. Sorry, but that wasn't a good brand. My other brands were brilliant, which are Rothmans and Peter Stuyvesant. But anyway, I had the Cavalier with Rothmans down the front, down the side. But I got home and my mum just said to me, "Darling, do you have to have Rothmans down the side?" I was like, "Yeah, of course I have to have Rothmans down the side." So that was my background.
That's awesome. Anyway, I don't want to digress into Formula One. Monaco Grand Prix was particularly boring. So let's start to unpack your building on the blog that you've the top tips of making new business part of the agency DNA. And before we came on air, it always sounds like we were sitting in the green room having a conversation. You started to unpack a really brilliant structure where I just want to let you just talk and let's work through that.
Well, thanks, Alex. That's a good build-up. I'm under pressure now. Yes, I mean, I think that firstly, fundamentally, it's the cultural piece, isn't it, about any business, and the last organisation I worked in, it was really important. New business was fundamentally part of the culture, but there was always that struggle about clients come first. And that's, I think, we're always in that space. So the most important, I think is to make sure that everyone in the business is accountable, that realizes that they've got a role to play. Because at the end of the day, new business is really just about building relationships. And we all do that all the time, whether it's down the pub, over dinner, or in a boardroom, we're all doing that anyway, aren't we? We're all capable of doing that. And that's part of our role. So it's kind of, firstly, I think, empowering and giving people some element of accountability around knowing what the business does. So just really fundamental. But really looking at your agency and thinking, well, does everyone in your agency, could they all describe what we do effectively, and would they come across and using their own words, but really put our proposition across well? So one of the little projects that I did, wasn't a little project, it was quite fundamentally important process, was within our organisation. Luckily, it was a really sunny. Do you remember when the sun came out, Alex? It was a really, really sunny summer. And we were in central London next to a park, and literally everyone in the organisation from top to bottom, so the intern right up to, actually not really the CEO because he was a new business machine and he knew what he was doing clearly, but anyone in between. I literally, right, we're going to the park, so we go out for a walk, we walk around the park, talk about, well, what is it you think we do? Give everyone a little bit of tidbits, a few case studies, a few sort of like just bits of information they might find useful. And then I say, okay, we're going to get in the elevator because we were in the 6th floor. Right, elevator pitch. We all know that about that. So get in the elevator and they'd all have to pitch to me going up the elevator. And firstly, it was a lot of fun. I got to know people a lot better. But I think what actually it did is it empowered people to be able to talk about what we do as a business in their own language. And so confident about that. And also, I think on a personal basis, especially the younger ones, it felt like they could actually, when they go into a project meeting, and we had clients like Ford and Toyota, you see around a project meeting, when everyone says, well, what do you do? And there's kids who've literally been on their first major project. They didn't really know how to describe what they did or how they fitted into the business. So it kind of helped them with that as well, which was a sort of a side thing. But it gave them the confidence. But more importantly, it gave them an interest felt that they had something to do. And quite often from then I'd have people come and say, oh, Julie, have you got a deck or a case study? Because I've been chatting to my friend down the pub and they're quite interested in this bit and that bit. And that's where you get the business, isn't it? Getting those little meetings and referrals. So I think fundamentally that was really important. And then also everybody was really interested in what was going on in the business then, because they felt they were part of it. And so I go in the office and literally be, right, Julie, what new business have we got? What are you up to? Who are you presenting to? What services are going really well? So it was starting that dialogue. So I think fundamentally that was, I'm not saying that's what you do, but that worked really well for me in that particular situation. So that was like the first.
I like the way that you it sounds like you were empowering the team to use it say in their own words or their own language, rather than everybody has to follow the script, because people have different ways of describing things. And if sometimes if you force somebody to kind of follow a script when you're in that meeting or that pitch, people know that you're kind of just following the script rather than actually describing in your own way, which sounds far more believable and enables you to be far more passionate about something. I mean, you need to believe in it to begin with, but to just describe that in your own way rather than the kind of the company policy, as it were.
Yeah. And let's be honest. I mean, Alex, if you were sitting down with a mate or you've met someone at a dinner party, you give them a bit of spiel. They say, "What do?" You give them a little bit of spiel, but it's always a funny story, isn't it? You wouldn't be coming out with some sort of scripted answer, and inevitably you'd probably take a bit of piss out of yourself, wouldn't you? And you'd be like, yeah. And then they go, "That's a bit interesting. Actually, I'm quite interested in that." So you need to be confident in what you're talking about, and you have to have it in your own words. So I think it sounds very basic, but actually it works. And I don't think that the company I work with is the only company who hadn't been through a process of understanding what they do. And we all do, like a lot of companies, and I think a lot of my colleagues do a great job at helping the agencies position themselves. I work more on this marketing and new business proposition development and planning. But I've got colleagues who do a great job on agency brand positioning. So I'm not knocking that. That's not what this is about. This is really about, describe in the 4 sentences what your company does and the benefits they could bring and why it's great to work with us. That kind of thing, real basic stuff. Awesome. But I think that's the first bit. So, get everyone on board, get everyone confident talking about what the business is, get them interested in that and understanding that actually new business is about growing the agency. It's about their future. And if the agency doesn't grow, and I've spoken and worked with so many agencies who said, "Oh, we had such a great year last year. We had 2 clients, they did brilliantly." Well, what's happened now? Actually, those 2 clients, things have changed. They need different things, or different personnel have come in and we're not working with them now, and we've got no clients. So I think when people really have to recognize that everyone has a part to play, because there's a need for a pipeline, because unfortunately, you might have the greatest client this year, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be happening the following year. So that's the way of agencies and
the way of sales, full stop. I think
yes, exactly.
Always drilled into me back in my recruitment days. You're only as good as your last deal. So yeah, well done, but move on to the next one now. That's done, move on. That's done, move
exactly
on.
Put it on your CV, try not to forget about it. but yes, it's exactly that. So I think that's sort of the cultural piece, but then there's a whole practical piece, isn't it, about so I think the most important thing firstly is to have a look at your sales and marketing strategy. If you haven't got one of those, please do talk to me. And identify what the key tasks are, and who's going to do them, for goodness sake, because you can come up with a great plan and everyone says, "Oh, that's brilliant. We're going to send out 2 emails every month, and we're going to create 3 blogs every month, and we're going to do X amount of LinkedIn posts." But Alex, from what you're with your lately, that's not an easy thing to do. And a lot of people underestimate the actual doing piece of it. They're all focusing on, "Oh, but I haven't got time to write that blog." And it's like, well, you've got to write 1 blog in 2 months. Come on, mate, you can do that. Where actually this team of marketeers have got to create, X amount of Twitter pieces. They've got to create X amount of blogs from this. They've got to create the graphics for it, all this kind of stuff. So you're not going into too much detail, but it's kind of breaking down what those key tasks are and who's doing them. And I think then you may well find that there's some gaps, there's some serious gaps within that, because the most important thing is that the marketing feeds the new business, and the new business knits up and joins up with the marketing. So identify what the key tasks are, who's doing them, and then you might find some capability gaps. And one of the things there actually is, why not, for example, with the company I work for, we didn't have anybody doing any video. Okay, video is there's an extreme part, isn't there? There's like, basic talking heads kind of thing we're doing today, and then obviously there's a company video. But just doing basic talking heads and creating some really good content, we weren't doing that, and we didn't have anyone doing it, and we needed someone to do it. And automatically it's like, well, let's get an agency. And it's like, hang on a minute. In the team there's a guy who actually really, really loved video and photography, and he wanted to learn more. Okay, brilliant. So, right, prove your point, put you on a course, here's the equipment, tell us what we need, crack on. And that was great from his point of view, and great from the agency's point of view, because we've developed a new capability, and we didn't have to pay for somebody from outdoors. So, I mean, it sounds obvious, but just look at what people are interested in, what they want to do. And you might have people, certainly a lot of people like writing. So, get them to write. you know. It's pretty basic stuff, but important. So
it is basic, but I think you raise a really interesting point there around, and I say this to organizations that I work with in my previous life, you know, break down those assumptions. It could be where it would be interesting to understand where that chap, which division, which part of the business he works in, because to your point on, you know, video is kind of blowing up in some respects in terms of it's a critical point, writing, analytics, all this kind of stuff. Or if you sell crypto advice, for example, you could have somebody in your IT team, or it could be your finance team, or it could be a junior somewhere on their side hustle, or what they do at weekends is they're a crypto enthusiast, or they're a videographer in terms of filming wildlife. But you just default to, oh, nobody in our marketing team, because this must be a marketing team, can do this, therefore we go outside, rather actually thinking you've got probably quite a wide employee base. How about asking anybody who works for you? Can anybody an expert in video? Oh, Bob, Sally, Jane in the in the IT department.
Yeah, totally.
You know, in the kitchen, for goodness sake, could be good at creating videos. So I think that you say it is basic, but a lot of organizations that I have worked with don't necessarily take that kind of step back and go, actually, building on your points earlier around everybody's responsible for new business. What do you mean by that? Is that the entire organization, i.e. everybody is responsible for new business, or just the team that is responsible for new business?
Well, I think it's the word responsible, isn't it? It's like, what are you responsible for? Yeah, not everyone in the business is responsible for bringing in a meeting and developing the pitch and winning the business. No, but I think everyone is in the business is responsible for identifying opportunities to build relationships. So I think that's anything from when you're at a dinner party having a chat, then if someone asks you about your business and they're interested, then follow that up, talk to them about it. See if you can get a meeting, put it into action, right through to, as I said, someone who's actually interested in video and doing videos. So it's kind of like you then, I think you've got a good point there, Alex, because you then unpack, well, who's responsible for what and who's accountable for what. So once you've got agreement that that person's going to write the newsletter every month, then, you know, you've got to put that into their KPIs. You've got to make them accountable for it. It's not a fluffy, oh yeah, you like doing a bit of writing. Okay, well, can you do the newsletter every month? Because that's not how it works, because people move on and life moves on. So whatever is agreed and whatever gaps are filled and whatever processes are agreed need to be fundamentally, they need to be included in everyone's KPIs, and they need to be, more importantly, communicated to the business. So I think when you get to that point, you've identified the gaps, who's doing what, then that is embedded and people are accountable for that. So that's really important, and we can come on to a little bit more about what that might look like in a minute. So I think it's about identifying the different important thing. And I mean, one thing really that is so vital but underlooked is data. And actually from my experience, I actually gave somebody data. She said, I don't want to do this. I was like, there's nobody else to do it. You're going to have to do it. It was the worst thing possible. She avoided it all the time. In fact, she ended up leaving. I don't think it was just because of data. But, you've got to be realistic. Data is just such a big thing, and it's quite often swept under the carpet. And the database is so important. So it's sort of from managing the database to making sure that you're adhering to the legalities of it. It's also making sure that there's emails and people's job descriptions are all in right. It's all put in right. And then there's how you're going to use that. So it's actually pulling that off, using it on a campaign. Using it for like your Christmas card list. So we've all been there, haven't we? We're going to send Christmas cards. Oh, has everyone got the addresses? Oh, I don't know. All your current clients. No, we haven't got that.
And the data's.
Have you done that, Alex? I bet you've done that, haven't you? Oh God!
Completely agree. And I don't eat my own dog food when it comes to data as well. I remember back in the day as a teenager doing data entry for some company, sat there going, just filling in spreadsheets as was. And what's interesting about data today is there's kind of, dare I say, no excuse with the technology platforms that are available.
So much great technology. That's what you need. Someone in data who's looking at the IT and the innovations around it to use that to make their database best. That's what you need.
You've got Cognizant, you've got White Rabbit Intel, you then got products like IntraHive who kind of monitor email traffic and help almost automate the data upkeep of your database or your CRM system. You still need to have the final kind of human eyeball. To your point, you still need someone managing it and monitoring it in terms of just making sure everything is kind of up to date. But it's not like it was when you and I 15 plus years ago.
No.
None of this existed, and it relied purely on the human salesperson to make sure every time you're logging your phone calls or your meetings or whatever it is, that you then update it into the CRM, meant to be during the event, but of course we never did it during the course of the event. You get to the end of the week and your management team would be on you because the system was empty. It's like,
you do your expenses first, Alex. Expenses first, and then your data. That was the important thing. Expenses first, then do your data.
Exactly. On the data bit then, and we touched on this again before we came on air in the green room, the virtual green room.
The virtual green room.
And responsibilities. We've been talking about responsibilities. So who, accepting the fact that not every organization may have the budgets for the kind of third-party data providers out there to help kind of do all this, who is responsible for this? Is it to your point, and you're one individual if no one else is there to do it, or is it the salesperson? Is it a combination of both? How do you?
I think it's the whole thing about everyone's accountable, because from someone who's setting up a project file for a new client, they need to make sure that their contact details are in the database correctly.
Yeah.
Through to a consultant who might be having a meeting with a new business contact, they should make sure that's in, and the new business person should obviously make sure that any new contacts are coming in. So it's really responsibility for everybody, and that's one of the things that can also be lost, and especially if you're changing systems. We were moving from our own system to HubSpot, for example. So one of my responsibilities was actually to go around and do some basic training with everyone in the business to make sure that everyone knew how to go through the process of entering a contact, company, deleting a company, all of those things onto the main CRM system. And that was absolutely essential, because there's no point, they wanted to give it to somebody in the office to do it, but everyone needs to know how to do that. That's just like part of your job. That is important. That is something they need to be doing. So that's one of those I suppose processes and the capability gap with the training that sort of demonstrates what I was talking about. So those, it's sort of understanding all those areas, and then it's kind of the process and ways of working. So I think one of the really, like we talk about data being important, one of the other fundamental points is, when you finish a project, somehow or rather the new business person, usually it's the new business director or manager, would have a creds deck. They'd have these case studies, but it's like, where do these case studies come from? As a new business director, I didn't know the ins and outs of the projects that had just been delivered. Obviously I knew the top line, but the person who's responsible for that is actually the consultant or the project manager, who needs to complete that project by getting a testimonial, by getting case studies and looking at collateral, all those types of things. And that needs to be written into a process. Process, I know, is a boring word, but if you're going to get that kind of output from it, wow, you need a process, don't you? So you should have a case study for everything that you've done. You should have testimonial, video testimonial, ideally, those types of things. So that needs to be kind of embedded into the process, and people need to be made aware that it's not just a case. Yes, it's important to get the PO, it's important to get the money, of course it is, but hey, let's rejoice and celebrate the great work we did with the client at that moment in time, and talk about it and get a really good case study and testimonial as a minimum, for example. So that's really important. That's a responsibility of whoever's running the project. So that is part of new business, because without fueling the new business collateral part, then I'm not going to have anything to talk about, am I? I'm not going to have something to share with the client. So absolutely vital, that.
Absolutely. And case studies always seem to be the bane of, or client testimonials seem to be the bane of everybody. Every organization I've worked in, it's either we haven't got them, if we do have them, they're out of date, or I don't even know where to find them in or
filing and all that kind of stuff. Process behind that. I had an amazing director of ops trainer at my old company, who's still a good friend. She was all over it, how the file should be set up, how everything should be. And I was like, being a salesperson, fundamentally, I'm like, just want to get out there and get some business. And you're just like, but it's so important, because you don't know where things are otherwise. And also, collaboration on documents, who's actually doing what, all that kind of things, and a bit of a nightmare. So I think that's really important. And things around something, for example, like events, really important for new business, really important to engage with people, but quite complex. So have a separate process. We used to call it like a cookbook So, what's the process? Who's responsible? How should it work? To make sure that everything works. You've got the right topic, you've got your speaker booked. That's always a good one.
Yeah.
And then you've got all your comms around it, and who's responsible for what. And where does a new business plug in? How are we going to get those new clients to really want to come along and get involved? And how are we going to manage that relationship, hopefully afterwards, that kind of thing. So that's really, really important. So, process, bit boring, but actually really, really important. And those are the fundamentals of kind of get everyone getting involved and points, I suppose, where everyone can feel involved. And that's another thing, something like in the business, like doing events, for example, like organising how many bottles of wine for how many people or whatever, and it's really, that's a kind of important skill to have. So, recognise that, I suppose. So that's really good. So that's kind of the process piece. And I suppose the other bit, really, the important piece is actually then how are you going to track this? So have you got a dashboard? Are you looking not just at numbers of calls and number of meetings and numbers of proposals, but are you looking at campaigns? Are you looking at your analytics? Are you testing, learning based on what you're doing? And all of those things are really important and need to be considered as to the process and how you pull marketing and your business together. So that's another part of DNA. And it might not be that the new business director is the best at Google Analytics, for example. Maybe that's the responsibility of the marketing manager or director to share that information and to get knock your heads together and actually learn and put plans, next plan into place based on that. So it's really important as well.
I think that's that ties in with the data piece as well. And if you it's interesting you to say that he to say that maybe the new business director is not so good at Google Analytics. They probably shouldn't be any good at Google Analytics. And even if they were, that's the responsibility bit. I would argue they are not responsible for that, but they maybe are responsible for taking ownership of then going to whoever is responsible for the Google Analytics, going, right, each week or each month, you and I are going to sit down together. You don't make any assumptions, just show me the data. I will then start to, look at some trends going, that's interesting. I can see from that's starting to tie in with, well, that happened 6 weeks before we were invited in for a pitch, or we were called by whoever it is. So it's that piece. And the interesting narrative that I'm seeing in kind of the world of SaaS tech sales is, the Forrester research that's coming out is that sales and marketing now need to work hand in glove across all industries.
Absolutely, totally.
You've got to start having that sales data and that marketing data, start bringing it all together into one place, and picking up your point exactly, kind of having a dashboard that then starts to draw this all up and start to look at trends, understand, learn from this. And they call it dynamic guided selling. So almost bring in that what's happening in the world of has been happening in the world of e-commerce for donkey's years, because it comes full circle to, I hate the human to human bit, but we're all people and we all buy as people. So start to use the data and insight that you're gleaning based on your historical reference points, understanding clients that you've worked with. How did they buy from you? What was the process and the journey that they went through? What were the touch points that happened with whom in your team to get to that outcome of a win? Because if you're following all the behaviors that you've described, recording data into CRM systems, et cetera, you should then be able to start to build a bigger picture to then help you maintain and drive that pipeline moving forward. But also, hopefully, my sense is, I believe this will help you get ahead of potential dips in pipeline or crises happening, because you get ahead of that problem before the problems happened, if that makes sense.
Totally. Absolutely, totally. And I think also on the flip side of that, events are great, but they're very time consuming, and they can sometimes take your eye off the ball for other things. So lessons I've learned is actually, if you do too much in that area, you then find that you haven't delivered your LinkedIn, your thought leadership, you haven't delivered your marketing campaign. You've all gone, everyone's obsessed with bums on seats. Obviously that's not so important with webinars, but when you're putting an event on in central London and you've got a bit of a budget against it, there's a big responsibility to get the right people there, and that is a mixture of marketing but new business as well, and sometimes that can take over. So I'd also say I have pushed back on occasion to say, look, we did 3 events in 1 month, and I was like, no, we're not doing that again.
That's crazy speak. And the thing about events, and I think events is going to be, I'll get your view on this in a minute in terms of what you're hearing in your world, but in the old world, dare I say it, is that events are created. And sometimes you see organizations, big brands, 3-day extravaganzas, no doubt amazing speakers, amazing content that's created out the back of those events. But then, I have technology which kind of watches and listens to hashtags. So you see it's kind of a couple of days before the event online, lots of conversation, huge conversation during the course of the event. And then it just tails off when you're thinking all that incredible content that you're sitting on, whose responsibility is it to make sure that that's being turned into talking heads, newsletters, blog posts, etc., which you could then drip feed for the next 12 months out through your campaigns to get bums on seat for the
next one,
the next event. And so few organizations actually do this effectively. But obviously the last 18 months or so, events haven't happened. It's interesting seeing what's happening in the US and Australia. They seem to be now coming back all offline, if that's the thing. What in your world, what's the word on the street in terms of events in the UK and in agency world? Do you think they'll come back as they were, or we've still got a bit of time?
I think there's a bit of time. I think it depends on who your clients are. I mean, what we're seeing is that, like, I think we had this conversation, tech, finance, especially, people are wanting to come back into the office. People are going to be about getting out and about. And it is about, I think, having an event when people have been working from home one week and then they're going to a big event next week. That's not going to happen. People have just got to get comfortable about getting on a train, for example, getting on the tube, getting on a plane, whatever it is. People have got to be comfortable about that. So I think we'll see certain sectors will come back fighting a bit quicker. And when you say events, it could be also company events. So I think that's where maybe agencies are going to start thinking about how they can bring people together without necessarily being all in one office. And that's where I think we're going to see some internal events. And I think it's going to be a need for that sort of team building. But I am hearing a lot of agencies actually aren't thinking about necessarily having an office. So they'll be thinking about different tactics about bringing people together. But it's interesting, I've heard some really good stuff. I was talking to a friend actually yesterday who works at a university, and she was saying that they were talking about new ways of working, and that a lot of the people said actually they'd had more one-to-one time with their line managers being virtual than when they were in the office. And I suppose thinking back, when you're in the office, you try and speak to your manager, it's very difficult because everybody else is trying to talk to them, aren't they? And you're sort of seen as a little bit of a kid, come on, can I speak to you? Actually, when it's a sort of more you're setting up certain times to talk to people. So I know that's not quite the same, but I think there's going to be some lessons learned. But there's still, like, for example, Pharma, one of my clients actually is an events agency. And Pharma is somewhere where they're still saying we won't even back in the office until next year. And so they're wanting, and we're delivering some really exciting virtual sort of phase 2, phase 3 virtual. So, I think it's going to be a sort of pivoting position depending on what sectors and the types of people involved.
And that's kind of what I'm hearing in terms of from my world as well. Finance, certainly the city, I'm getting hearing that more and more people want are going back into the office. But the employer is kind of being run so restrictive in terms of numbers and what has to happen and this and that. But if I then reflect back to what we were talking at the beginning in terms of you mentioning that you kind of bounced off the buzz of the office and who's doing what's the latest kind of gigs we're working on, that's really hard to kind of translate that into kind of a virtual world, be it on Slack, be it on Teams, be it on Discord, whatever kind of the collaboration platform is. And I guess this is an unfair question because we're kind of all organizations are figuring this out, and you touched on kind of the internal quasi-virtual AR VR events, but how does one kind of still maintain that new business buzz? And I'm hearing that from out and out cold callers in tech world when they're having to do this at home by themselves, and they haven't got the buzz of if they've had a crappy day of new business, they can't bounce to their colleagues who've also had a crappy day or pick each other up. So where does that all kind of fit into this online world we find ourselves?
Well, I think it's really difficult, and it's not, especially in new business, because we are kind of new business animals, or people who do bounce other people do get the buzz, that's the kind of people we are. So I think it's really difficult for anyone to keep motivation up. And I think it's just really identifying what's working and pushing forward with that. And for me, it's around talking with other, like we did with the BD 100. That was really great to meet other business development people and marketeers who were having the same challenges and talking to them. And what I found was, new business is such a broad skill base, capability base, is that speaking to the new business people, I've had some good opportunities where people say, well, actually I don't do that bit, or I do this bit, or I don't do that bit. So actually we start collaborating more. So that's me the exciting piece, is that just because you're both in new business doesn't necessarily mean you're in competition. And that's how we started talking, wasn't it, really, Alex? There's so much more collaboration, and that's the bit I'm enjoying, and that's why I'm delighted you said to come along today, is actually meeting new people and starting new conversations. You just don't know where those are going now, and that's what's exciting for me. So yeah, I think that to me is where I'm getting the buzz, is actually not necessarily talking to all new business people, but people who are in your field or in that area, to build your skills, but also lead on to other things. And I think that's what's super exciting.
You're absolutely right, and that's fundamentally any person who's any type of sales role. It's about just starting conversations with people, and seeing where it goes. If it doesn't go anywhere, ask for referrals. Anybody else that you think in my network I should be talking to? And that's the beauty of I'm kind of desperate to get back into kind of face to face. I'd far rather be doing this with you in a room than in this environment. But this is great in terms of how we connected. But it's just things like social, LinkedIn. We touched on that in the BD 100. Think about your network. Just get out there and just start conversations with people online. It's no different to you starting a conversation with a stranger at a dinner party, in a physical conference. Just go and start those conversations with the people you want to be talking to online, and you can end up having multiple conversations with multiple people at once, which could then spawn. I don't know why I built before, that's the wrong word. Can grow into
yeah
new relationships.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's what I think that's what everyone should be doing. And I think, to be honest, the benefit of the ability to just have a Zoom call like this means that you have access to more people. And I think if people are more in the mindset of, well, let's have a chat. So I've had some really good conversation with people I never thought I would even really think about. Why would I be talking to them? And now it all kind of makes sense why I'm talking to them, I think it's good from a point of view of being able to easily hook up. But people that you really want to build a long-term relationship, you've identified where the opportunities are to work, that's when you want to then go and have a coffee and have a good old chat and really get to know them. I mean, but you can have a very good conversation with somebody just getting to know where the opportunities might lie. And that's where I think the virtual piece is going to help. And hopefully, like someone said to me yesterday on a call, we won't have to go up to bloody Harrogate. Sorry, nothing wrong with Harrogate. I love Harrogate, but it was just a long way from where I live. So anywhere that's a long way from where I live, just got there for a chemistry meeting for half an hour and come all the way back. Hopefully we won't have to do that anymore.
No, I think that's certainly.
I really like Harrogate, by the way. I'm just saying that was just.
Go Harrogate.
Go Harrogate, yeah.
And that's certainly what I'm seeing on kind of my side of the fence in terms of field sales. I think it's going to be is almost going to cease to exist as we know it. Because to your point, clients are like, well, I don't need you just to drop in and kind of we just hop on a Zoom call. We can just have it different. I also totally agree with you that for the longer term, bigger relationships, that in person is critical. At some point, there needs to be a handoff from here to. I actually need to meet you if you're going to sign off on $100,000 deal with us, whatever that is. I kind of want to meet you and look at the white of your eyes. And
exactly. To see if you're the kind of person I really can speak. And is your background a real background? Do you really live in a house, or are you in some caravan or tent at the bottom of the garden?
You have a library of all those books you have.
Yes, have you read them all? I'll be checking up on you. So no, I think that's really, really important. So anyway, so fundamentally, I think just bringing it all round, we talked about the KPIs, but I think the other thing is and we could have another whole session on how individual people could help. But I mean, for example, if you're an account director, you could be building relationships through your network for the company, and you could be set a target to be doing that. So that's something that'd be really, really easy. But I think that what I was going to say fundamentally is how you then make sure that you keep the business up to date. So like we've all done, start off on a path. Yes, we're all going to have new business scheme, part of our DNA, we're going to do this. But actually, 4 months down the line, is someone talking about it? Is anyone reporting on it? Is anyone actually bothered about it? And is there much of a focus? Because if there isn't, or even if it's written into KPIs, it would be the last thing you do. So it's all about, for me, it was all about managing new business backup. So having those conversations. More importantly, for example, we had a bi-weekly meeting with all the senior leadership team. Mm-hmm. It was more frequently than a management meeting to talk about new business.
Yeah.
So, have you done what you said you're going to do? Why haven't you done what you said you're going to do? What do you need to do what you said you're going to do? And that's where you can start talking about, topics for events and really sort of pick the brains of the senior leadership team. So that was something that was really important. That was in everyone's diary, and that was you didn't miss that. The CEO was there, everyone was there. It was really important. That, I think, gave a message out to everybody. And the second thing was, we probably all have, hopefully all agencies have like a monthly update, a few drinks, whatever you're going to do. Make sure new business is always front of foot on that. Make sure that people are given credit when they've done things. Make sure that the business is clear about what needs to happen and how much of a pipeline we've got. There's no point in the senior management team shying away from the fact that actually we've got nothing in the pipeline. Shit, it's not looking good. If we're all in it together, so we need to share that, and we need to share an action plan. We need to make people aware that this needs to happen. Otherwise, we're going to have some problems down the line. Yeah. So that's sort of in sort of summarising what I was going to say. I think it has to be throughout the whole business, and that needs to be an ongoing dialogue, Alex.
Manage up, manage down. It's a two-way street in terms of all that. Julie, this has been awesome and fascinating. Thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure.
Where can people find you? I can point them to your website, to your LinkedIn profile, on a paddleboard maybe.
Yeah, you can point me to definitely to my LinkedIn. You can obviously get hold of me, and if you want, I think go to LinkedIn if you want to have a chat. If you want to know more about what I do and check me out, then go to my website. There's my phone number on there. Give me a call. I mean, it's all about creating relationships and connecting with people, Alex. It's been an absolute delight. Thanks ever so much for giving me the opportunity to chat. And as I said, key thing is everyone wants to talk about process, but what I can help them with is the planning process, proposition development. I can mentor your teams, but also at the end of the day, I can get the sleeves rolled up and help you to build those relationships, however works best for your business, and get that new business embedded into your agency.
Perfect. What a way to end. As always, thanks everybody tuning in and listening. If you want to be a guest on this podcast and you know what to do, if you didn't think if you put your teeth back in, Alexander. There was me, Julie, saying we're not going to edit things or like screw things up. I'm going to leave this in. If you know somebody who you think should be on this podcast, you also know what to do. Otherwise, I will let Julie get back to her paddleboard yoga. That's for a whole separate story, and I will continue my day.
Yeah, it's a separate story.
Stay safe and keep well. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alex. Thanks. Bye.